So I have a number of pets as well. I have an Italian Greyhound named Wesley. I have 3 cats. One of them is named Loco, one of them is named Joey, and the other one is named Willow. We also have 2 slow bunnies, and one is called Bofa, and the other one is called Binya. They are both Egyptian. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Playing with Power podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things cEDH, EDH, and Magic the Gathering. I am Ryan.
I'm Cal.
I'm Zach.
I'm Mike.
I'm Adam.
And today we're going to be doing a Q&A episode. We pulled all of our social media to ask all of you questions to have us answer, and today we're going to be answering those.
Before we go any further, we just wanted to talk quickly about our sponsors. They are TCG Player, Dragon Shield, and Patreon. When you purchase your cards and accessories, be sure to buy them from tcgplayer.com. They give some of the best prices on the internet, and you still get to support local game stores. When you receive that product, make sure to protect it with Dragon Shield accessories. They are the best in the business when it comes to quality, and Playing with Power has been using them to protect our stuff for years. And finally, this content comes from the support of viewers like you over on Patreon. We have all kinds of benefits for our patrons, including Patreon meetup days, Discord access, entry into our webcam tournaments and leagues, and a whole host of others. The links for all of these things are in the description below, so consider supporting us today.
And for each episode, we do a Patreon shout-out, and today's Patreon shout-out will be Ryan Wright. Thanks for being a patron.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan.
Okay, without further ado, let's dive into our Q&A session. So we're going to go ahead and take it right from the top with our first question.
All right, today's first question comes from Tyler Craig from YouTube, and he asks, what's the most memorable or spiciest win you guys have ever had in a game? When I saw this question, I was like, instantly went to one singular game in my mind. Unfortunately, it was never captured on camera. What happened was I was playing the first sliver. I went turn 1 preordain, and I scryed a Thassa's Oracle into the bottom of my library. A couple turns go by, I cast a Destiny Spinner, and then I go main phase Tainted Pact. And everyone looks around and like, sure, okay. And I'm like, alright. I flip my entire deck, put Thassa's Oracle into my hand, and then cast an uncounterable Thassa's Oracle. And everyone just flipped out. They're like, how did you know that was there? And I'm like, I scryed it to the bottom 4 turns ago. It was a really spicy win, for sure.
So my most memorable cEDH game would have to be when Playing with Power was at SCGCon in 2019. We were playing with Sheldon of the Rules Committee in CAG. Garrett was helping him pilot Najila, and then we also had Mike, Folger, and myself. I can't remember what the other 2 were on. I was playing Kess Consult at the time. This was pre-Thoracle. And I had honestly not a good hand, a handful of counter spells, and then I drew Yawgmoth's Will, and I thought, okay, I'm just going to cast this Yawg Will and get these like mana rocks that I got discarded or destroyed earlier in the game, and like set up, to do something in a turn or 2, and maybe I can get something going. So I cast this Yawg Will, and the table starts deliberating, okay, what's he got in his graveyard? What's he going to do? Folger noticed that I had an Ad Nauseam, and he's like, oh, he can Ad Naus and cast this ritual and do this spell, and guys, he's going to win. And there was a huge counter war. Sheldon posted the I think 8 card stack onto his social media at one point, and one very long counter war later, I basically emptied my hand. I Ad Naused for enough cards, and I happened to get the win there. To me, what makes it so spicy and memorable, though, is because the Yawg Will was honestly just for value. I was just going to get some mana rocks and set up for like 1-2 turns down the road, but then the rest of the table gave me the win, saying, oh my god, he can do this and that, and then he's going to win the game. And it was a great time.
Okay, so Ozzy Mendiaz from Twitter asks, What is one card that is extremely overhyped in cEDH, and what's one card that's extremely undervalued or overlooked? So, off the top of my head, right now, I would say that as far as overhyped cards go, I would say that a lot of people are doing this Ragavan thing. Ragavan is making huge waves in all these different formats, and for all I know right now, this might be a hot take and end up being a cold take 6 months down the line. But I'm showing a lot of times that Ragavan's actually underperforming. Sure, no one's going to really top deck tutor into an attacking Ragavan, and getting the treasure's kind of nice. But I've found more often than not that there are just better creatures that you want to turn sideways with. The idea of actually losing a card off the top of your library by not blocking Ragavan will make people just block Ragavan. So when you're in these multiplayer formats, I have this feeling that, it's just not doing the same work that it is in the 1v1 formats. It's making a lot of splashes and waves and other ones, and that's great, and it's doing great work, but for some reason, it's just not really translating into cEDH nearly as much. The other one I think that is undervalued or overlooked is actually also from Modern Horizons 2, and it's Dragon's Rage Channeler. A lot of people are seeing this once again in the 1v1 formats, and they're thinking, oh, it's great because it's kind of like a Delver replacement, becomes a 3/3 flyer and stuff. But what I have seen out in the wild so far is that it is really good for Underworld Breach strategies. Being able to, every non-creature spell you cast, being able to surveil and just fill your graveyard for Breach is fantastic. It's already in the colors for Breach. It's a 1-drop that can attack with Tymna and later on becomes a better one. It's just a really, really good card, and I don't think enough people running Breach are running this card at the moment.
So one card that comes to mind for me being extremely overhyped is, and like overvalued, I would say, is Thassa's Oracle. That card...
Nuclear hot takes.
It's Thassa's Oracle.
Wow.
It's the card for a lot of like win cons that actually say you win the game, but it's not the card that's actually winning you the game. It's just the last thing that happens in the game. What actually wins you in the game is your Adnaz, your Peer of the Abyss, your Underworld Breach, your Notion Thief Wheel. That's what's actually propelling you to get to your Thassa's Oracle. Sometimes, yeah, you go turn 3 Thassa's Oracle, Demonic Consultation, sure. That's a thing you can do, but it's not always like a reliable thing. So for me, Thassa's Oracle is extremely overhyped, although it does go into every deck because it is the thing that closes out the game. You also have like a Brain Freeze with your Underworld Breach stuff, but sometimes people run Shuffle Titans if you're playing against like Frog or something, so you can't do that to them. So you have to, Thoracle to just say you win the game.
The YouTube commenters hated him because he spoke the truth.
Because he spoke the truth.
Speaking the truth, yeah.
I don't know what happened. Our subscriber count dropped in half overnight.
For the other half of this question, the undervalued card that instantly pops into my head is Narset's Reversal. When this card was originally printed, every blue deck was playing it. It was awesome. You're returning people's Adnazes to their hands and then getting your own Adnaz for 2 mana. It's disruptive. You gain a huge advantage with it. It was such a sweet card. And I don't think it gets enough love as it should nowadays, and I think that's mainly due because of the more efficient counter magic that has been printed since Narset's Reversal. So we got like Fierce Guardianship, I want to say Miscast, things like that, where it's just cheaper, more efficient stack interaction. Plus, Narset's Reversal is a little bit of a niche card as well, so you can't always you couldn't stop someone's Hull Breacher, for instance, but we don't have to worry about that anymore because it only hits instants and sorceries and all that. So it's a little narrow in that realm, but its ceiling is through the roof. So that's the sleeper card for me for sure.
It also doesn't hit Underworld Breach, which is also like a big one. But it's a
true.
great card. It's just it's like blue decks now have so many free counter magic and so much counter magic. It's really hard. Even like counterspell itself and delay don't end up making the cut because there's just so many good counter spells.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the only time I really see it in a deck list nowadays is if you're playing like mono blue
or Twister Loops. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Twister Loops as well. Yeah, and you just need mono blue just needs everything,
Mm-hmm.
So.
Can we also talk about how he said the ceiling was through the roof?
Thank you.
Did I?
The ceiling is
Did I
through
say
the
that?
roof. The ceiling is the roof.
That's not true.
Yeah, that's not true.
Okay, yeah, I guess we could split hairs
The
there.
ceiling
This,
is
this,
through
this
the
I
card's
mean-
so good that the ceiling goes through the roof.
The ceiling's been blown off this place. Let's go.
Yeah, so good.
Wow, I said that. Okay.
Yeah, you did. The ceiling is through the roof. Sorry, it's so funny. Okay, so Adam, you want to go now?
Our next question comes from Brandon Skaggs of YouTube, and he asks, what is your favorite all-time commanders and playstyles? So for me, cEDH would definitely have to be Edric, and that perfectly lines up with my playstyle of preferring jank over anything. If I can have fun, do something goofy, then I'm happy. When Opus Thief first came out, Wheels wasn't really a strategy, until Opus Thief. Turning a lot of small creatures sideways is not a common strategy in cEDH, even as of a few years ago. So doing that and, being told, oh yeah, a bunch of 1/1 flyers with some time walks is a competitively viable strategy. I'm like, okay, no, it's not. And then I gave the deck a shot and I thought, okay, yes, this is hilarious. So definitely jank for me. Casual's a whole other story because there's all tons of different variations of jank that you can get into. But cEDH, Edric, jank, all day.
For me, my favorite all-time commander is definitely Rashmi Eternity's Crafter. I've been playing Rashmi as my main cEDH deck for years and years now, pretty much ever since she was released. No matter how good or bad she's been as the meta has shifted. And that relates directly to my favorite playstyle, which is certainly Control. On my turn, I just want to draw a card and pass to you. So that's certainly my favorite all-time commander and playstyle.
My all-time favorite commander and playstyle, moreover, is doing graveyard strategies outside of cEDH. Love playing with my graveyard, so my top commander for that is Carador Ghost Chieftain. That card does everything I've ever wanted to do in Magic. It doesn't cost very much. It plays with your graveyard. It's a lot of fun. A lot of powerful things you can do with the graveyard. So that's my pick for sure.
So one of my favorite all-time commanders and strategies is definitely Mono Red, and Perforos is my personal favorite because it was the one that basically made burn a viable strategy inside of Commander. Back when Commander was in its earlier days, this I guess was 10 years ago now, not during its inception, of course, but there were certain things that they said, no, this just isn't viable. You can't play aggro, you can't play this, you can't play burn. They don't translate into 4-player formats. And Perforos came out and said, guess what? You can make burn a viable strategy. You can burn everybody out. And I took that love of Mono Red and definitely carried that with me throughout all the different other Commander decks and playstyles that I've had. And I've always been hard leaning into that aggro strategy. It's translated into things like Godo Bandit Warlord. And it's always carried through into everything else that I've ever done in Commander.
My favorite all-time commander and playstyle, surprisingly, even though my favorite playstyle is mid-range, my favorite commander is Grinzo Havoc Razor Mono Red, because I just love so Cascade has always been my favorite mechanic, and casting random spells off the top of people's library is just, with these crappy little creatures, it's just so fun to me. You make these little crappy unblockable things, and just maybe I'll hit something sweet, maybe I hit nothing. But it's just the randomness. I mean, that's probably what drew me into Commander, is just there's a lot of inconsistencies to it. Let's forget the fact that I'm a cEDH player, but whatever. So yeah, Grinzo Havoc Raider is definitely my favorite.
All right, this one is from Jason Bielke. I'm sorry if I said that wrong, from YouTube. They asked, would a 10 to 15 card sideboard make fringe commanders more viable, or meta commanders just too much more powerful? I think for me to answer this question, you kind of have to pull back the lens a little bit and think about what actually makes powerful commanders powerful in the first place. I think so many of the reasons why the powerful commanders that we see be so good is because They just create tons of value all on their own. They're just enabling their game plan so much more, and that's like what a lot of the fringe commanders are missing. So I think a sideboard wouldn't really change commander viability at all. I think if anything, it would just give the meta commanders more tools to work with, since they're already doing so much more powerful things in the command zone to begin with. Especially if you start getting into Burning Wish, Wish proper from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, obviously Cunning Wish. I never ever want to see cast Cunning Wish against me. Are you kidding me? So I think if anything, it's just going to make meta commanders infinitely more powerful, leaving fringe commanders in the dust.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same page there. Giving ad nauseum decks the ability to not actually have to play Peer to the Abyss, you can just go tutor it up if in the situation where you need it, because a lot of times if you draw it, it will just sit in your hand for a very long time, or you'll reveal it and take a bunch of damage off your ad naus. Giving stacks decks the ability to card for Mycosynth, I think it's okay, like fringe stacksy decks, but I don't actually think that's that good, because you still have to cast it, and you're probably not having 10 11 mana whatever in one turn. What I think would happen is it would add power to ad nauseum decks, and not a ton else. So at least just the feeling that I get from it is that it would just make powerful commanders more powerful. Max Camper from YouTube says, I need to know your favorite cards. So for me, I picked 4 cards. Obviously, my number one is Ragavan Nimble Pilferer. I just love that card. It is everything I could ever want in a Magic card. It's a monkey. It makes treasures. It provides value. It's a 2/1 for 1. It's amazing. Nothing will ever compare with Ragavan. And I know it's bad in cEDH, but that card is just awesome. Okay, I've built Modern and Legacy just on that card. My number 2 is Possibility Storm. Going back to casting random cards off the top of libraries, I love when you're able to build your deck to abuse that card, or it just creates chaos in games, and I love that. And then my next one would be Experimental Frenzy. More casting of cards, more red cards, surprisingly. Number 4 would be Thrasios Triton Hero. I started cEDH with Thrasios. I still play Thrasios. It's just the amount of times that I've activated, it's just such a good feeling to draw cards and ramp off Thrasios. So that would be my top 4.
So I would say that over the years, I've seen countless cards, and there are 2 cards that come to mind when asked this question. The first one is Masticore. It's from Urza's Destiny way back in the day, and this card seems so unassuming. It's on the reserve list, and everyone's like, it's like $1 card. Why is this thing on the reserve list? Because it was such a completely busted and dominant force when it was actually in standard. I'm showing my age really badly right now, but it was such an amazing card that people just couldn't deal with this card. It was so unbelievably dominant, and it was so unassuming, and it actually taught me a lot about Magic, and Magic from a more tournament standpoint, like actually playing at tournaments versus just the kitchen table. Masticore was what took me from the kitchen table into an actual tournament scene. The second card, I would say, and this would be actually my number 1 card of all time, is the one that quintessentially defines red, in my opinion, and that card is Gamble. 1 red, find any card, but you got to discard a card at random. And a lot of people will look at that and be like, well, the downside is kind of big, and everyone jokes that, oh, there's a red Entomb, you discarded the card, it goes in your graveyard. But it's still played in cEDH all the time, because you can still take those chances, and the payoff is so great that people will do it and play it in the most competitive formats. Gamble is a fantastic card that captures the flavor of red so well. So I would say that's actually my number 1 card of all time.
You can tell Ryan's a cEDH player because his favorite card's a tutor.
That's not true. I used to have Gamble in my Perfuro stack, and then it wasn't good, so I stopped.
All right, I'll go next. My favorite Magic card of all time is one that I secretly think is fringe cEDH playable in the right situations, but it's not quite there. It is Manifold Insights. It is a really niche 3 CMC blue sorcery from Commander 2016. You reveal the top 10 of cards of your library, and then starting your opponents go around in turn order and choose to give you a different non-land card from all the cards you revealed, and you put all those cards in your hand. It's just like fact or fiction, but cranked up to the extreme. Obviously, it's worse fact or fiction, but it's that kind of effect. You get to look at a ton of cards, and then you get to give your opponents a ton of choices, and then pretty much no matter what comes out of it, you spent 3 mana to get hopefully 3 pretty good non-land cards. Because how the math works out. A lot of times your opponents only have 6 or 7 cards to actually choose from, because 3 to 4 of them are going to be lands, and then of those, there's got to be some great cards in there, right? But everything about the card just appeals to me.
So for me, I have 3 cards that are on the top of the list for me, and I'm gonna call it 3 cards, but it's really 2 cards and a 2-card quote combo. So first on the list, number 1, Oracle Moldiah. That card does everything I've ever wanted to do in Magic. You play extra lands, you play with the top card of your library, you just ramp. Card's so much fun. I play it in like every green deck in Casual. I'm horrible. Second for me is definitely a nostalgia card. It's my favorite card all time ever printed. It's Weatherseed Treefolk. You can Google it now. And it's just a real old card. I started playing Magic with this card. I thought it was awesome because you play it and they kill it and then it comes back. And I'm like, this is the best thing ever. It never goes away. I was really bad at Magic when I first started. And then lastly for me, I really miss Paradox Engine. I wish it wasn't banned, but I'm sorry guys, but I am probably one of the reasons why, it got banned, because I was abusing it in Casual like a monster. And I would pair Paradox Engine with all of like the fast mana and mana rocks. This is before my cEDH days. And then I'd have all of that together with Sunbird's Invocation. Ooh. And the deck was built to basically go infinite, but not go infinite at the same time. So I was the horrible person that would build up this massive turn, take 20, 30 minutes, constant game actions, and then have this massive board state, not kill the table, and then pass the turn.
That's exactly why it was banned.
I was a monster with that card, but it was so much fun.
I don't think I ever saw a Paradox Engine in Casual. That's the weird thing. Like I saw it a lot in cEDH. Yeah. That's about it.
I don't think anyone else played it down in our meta. I was like the only one that played Paradox Engine. Yeah, and I actively tried building this deck to not go infinite. And so like one thing I did back in the day was I didn't run counterspells, because nobody likes playing against counterspells, but I'm doing Paradox Engine things, so like, woo. And I decided to put in Venser Shaper Savant into my deck. And I'm like, this isn't really a counterspell, and it's just like I slow you down or whatever. And then I had a game where, I got put Paradox Engine out on 2, and I had Venser in my hand, I looked at the table, I'm like, I'm sorry guys, I just went infinite. My bad. Yeah, the Josh Lee Kwai, whoops, I went infinite moment.
Okay, so my favorite card, by the time this has been recording, it's been out for quite a while. I've pretty much put my whole identity around it. Pride Malkin. Listen, it goes great in Animar. Okay.
It goes with Animar. I'm like, Malkin, baby.
It goes into Animar.
I just wanted to get that out there because I knew that, I'm sure I was going to get dogged on by Ryan for that, so I just wanted to end before Ryan. Okay. So I can easily say that my favorite card is probably from Odyssey. It's a card called Magnivore. It is a star with haste, costs 2 red, and it has its power and toughness is equal to the number of sorceries in all graveyards. So back in 2007, this was a standard deck where it ran Eye of Nowhere, Boomerang, Pyroclasm, Stone Rain, Demolish, Wildfires, that sort of thing, and it just kept its opponents off of lands and really resources and creatures, and then on some turn number, it would slam down this hasty 11/11, and I'd swing, and they'd have nothing that they could do about it. And then the next turn, I would destroy their one land that they could play, and I'd play a second one and swing for another 24 at that point. It was great. I was not a good player back then, and the guy that taught me how to play was really big into elves. He liked it a lot, and of course, even to this day, elves are still very good. And we in the friend group at the time would refuse to play against his elf deck, refused to play against his sliver deck. It was oppressive. It was way too much for our wee little magic brains at the time. And when I got my hands on this Magnivore deck, all my friends stopped wanting to play against that deck for the same reasons, because it was actually good, as opposed to just being, like in Elves' case, a strong tribe, or us being competitive players otherwise. I think aside from I refused to play against that deck, the other best compliment I ever got regarding the deck was he destroyed 21 of the 25 lands in my deck. Yeah, wow. and that was from a guy who at the time was like a standard grinder, was going all the FNMs and stuff. It was really good. I love the card. I still try to make it work to this day in Modern, but I'm not up to date with the Modern metagame. But anytime you see a Magnivore on a forum, or maybe in the comments section, it's most likely me. I love that card.
Gideon Bjorklund from YouTube asks, have you guys ever considered doing some 1v1 content, maybe with Canadian Highlander, Legacy, or even 1v1 Commander? The answer to that question is yes. We are actively ramping up to record Legacy 1v1 gameplay. Each of the members has 4 decks put together. We've been learning them over the past couple of months, and here shortly we're going to be starting to record gameplay and then upload some Legacy content onto the YouTube channel. As for the other the Canadian Highlander and 1v1 Commander, that's not on our radar as of right now, but for sure Legacy is.
Okay, so Jonas from YouTube asks, I play casual EDH in a playgroup solely consisting of relatively new EDH players. I feel like the group has an unjustified negative view of the cEDH style of play that is that of an unnuanced and boring way of playing the format. However, I also feel that my playgroup consists of some very intelligent people, and I actually think they would enjoy the cEDH puzzle if they tried it. How would you try to introduce such a group to cEDH? This is actually a really good question. So I feel that this happens in metas all over the place. Somebody sees a cEDH video, or they see a cEDH deck and they really want to try it out, but they have this kind of outsider looking in perspective from the cEDH format, and they might have this, like you said, this negative stigma attached to it. There's a number of different ways that I would probably suggest getting people into it. Number one, I would look at the way that people are already playing. There's a lot of times when somebody will take a casual commander and they will ramp it up to a cEDH thing. Or they already have something that is a cEDH commander and they're just not playing it in a cEDH style. So something like Selvala, Heart of the Wilds, maybe Yuriko, the Tiger's Shadow, things like that. These are commanders that are played in the cEDH metas, and you can show them that, hey, you can take this playstyle that you like so much and play it over here as well. Another thing you might want to introduce them to is the idea of just battling in a different zone than the battle that they're used to. There's a lot of stigma that you're going to have to try to shed when you're talking about battling somewhere on the stack versus battling on the battlefield, because there is stigmas around counter spells. I don't like counter spells in my commander games and stuff. But you can also show people that the battles can be just as grandiose and epic on the stack that they are on the battlefield themselves. You can still have just as good a time on the stack that you can on the battlefield. So sometimes maybe taking a strategy or a deck and telling them, hey, I'm going to show you some areas where we can play in other ways that isn't just resolving your Craterhoof Behemoth and turning sideways, that you can still actually have a lot of fun. And then the third thing I would do is just take some time to just really do work to shed them of that stigma, because some people just aren't going to listen to you until they see it for themselves. If you throw a deck in front of somebody and you say, this is a good deck, trust me, it's cEDH, they're already going to come in with a preconception. So sometimes maybe showing them gameplay that has people's personalities come through. You'll see YouTube channels like Play to Win show this. The Spike Feeders is another great way. And you say, hey, look, there's this deck over here. They're playing Yuriko. You play Yuriko too. Go check it out. Oh, wow, we're all having a great time doing this. Maybe that's something we should try as well. So these are some of the things that I would try and do. One other thing that I would also suggest as an addendum to this is don't force it. Don't start to give out ultimatums. Don't start to give out demands or anything like that. Really just let people play how they want to play. At the end of the day, cEDH isn't for everyone, and that is perfectly okay. It's perfectly fine for them to say, I don't want to play cEDH. I just don't like it. And that's fine. Whether or not they ever play it is completely up to them. But also just try to tell them, be like, how about we try it one time, and if you don't like it, I won't talk about it anymore, and at least give them the opportunity to see. I was one of those people. I didn't like it, but I was outside looking in, having never tried it. I tried it out, and I was hooked, and I never looked back. All it took was that one time to get addicted, if you will, and I highly recommend that you tried that. But whatever you do, don't force anybody. So that's some tips and tricks that I would give people to try and get them into this format.
So another issue that people seem to have getting into cEDH is their prior experience against cEDH. This was more of a stigma, I guess, a few years ago, but it's been getting better a lot, which is really good. People's first exposure to cEDH, at least for a long time, has been, this one guy comes with his pub stomping deck, or, maybe it's not even what we would consider traditional cEDH now, just a deck that is significantly better. Or maybe they would come with a, what is now a regular cEDH deck, and they would just run over people turn 2, turn 3, and then the round would be over. They get their prize pack or whatever, and they move on. They ruin the experience that they go to EDH FNM for by just ending the game right there. They came to have fun and they didn't. So finding out why people don't want to get into cEDH could be very helpful and very eye-opening. Maybe it's because of this. Maybe it's because of these pub stompers. And trust me, the community's gotten a lot better over time. And as Ryan had said before in an interview with the professor, the people that go and pub stomp aren't real cEDH players. Actual cEDH players are very humble. They just want to. It's a battle of wits between the players. It's not I want to show you up. I want to prove something to anybody. I want to stomp people into the dirt. That's not what the cEDH mindset is. It's wanting something different out of the experience that is the game. And in this case, it's a battle of wits, which is also why the cEDH community is 100% proxy friendly. They're not trying to battle against your wallet. They're trying to battle against the player. If you have smart people in your group, and maybe they had that bad experience with pub stomping cEDH players, then try to figure that out. Try to suss out from them what those issues are, and see if you can address those. So our next question comes from Sir Toasty Toes of YouTube, and they ask, if you could color shift any monocolored card, which card and to which color? I'm going to have to go with a little bit of a cop-out answer here. It would easily be converting Ristic Study to white. Everything that Ristic Study does, taxing people for taking actions, is all about what white does. We can all probably objectively say that blue has a little too many tools in their toolbox as is, because they're basically able to do everything, not even necessarily just from a cEDH perspective. But Ristic Study, especially in the block that it was printed, or really the time frame that it was printed, it should be a white card. White needs that card draw, which everybody says. But the taxing part especially is exactly where white is and has always been. Ristic Study should be a white card.
Okay, so my card that I would shift, and it's a monocolored card, would be Elvish Spirit Guide. Complete the cycle. Get a zombie spirit guide, a soldier spirit guide, and I guess a Merfolk
Merfolk
Spirit
Spirit
Guide.
Guide.
Yeah.
This-
So that's what I would do. I would complete that cycle. Green and red already has it. Why not give it to the other
That's-
5 colors?
Because
That's
it's
just
one of
what
the most broken
cEDH needs.
cycles of all time,
Let's
Ryan.
add 3 more pieces of fast mana to cEDH. Why don't we just unban the Moxen too?
Hey, I stand by. Oh, but the red and green ones are okay.
No,
I
they're
mean,
not.
No, we don't
Okay.
need more, right?
No, we need more. We need to print Zombie Spirit Guide, Kithkin Spirit Guide, and Merfolk Spirit Guide. We need to have this cycle completed. That is the one I would absolutely color shift and break the format. Apparently,
Yeah, okay.
even though
let me-
Elvish and Simeon don't break the format, but whatever.
Oh my god.
Oh, they do.
The other 3 colors are better. What are you talking about?
White,
Right.
white's better. Come on, man.
Bro,
White
white's
fast
a-
Yeah,
mana? Come on
white,
now.
white has Ristic Study in this scenario.
All right, guys. Personally, I would make Rule of Law blue.
I call it
Have
something
you heard
like
of Arcane
something
Laboratory?
laboratory or something. Yeah.
No.
Yeah,
That
okay.
was my nuclear hot take, apparently.
Yeah, if we're color shifting things, let's just make Urborg in every color too. Why not have?
I actually like
Why
that
not
idea
have-
only
too.
No!
There's
Make-
already 2 of them.
There's Cradle
so-
of Growth, Urborg.
No.
I think that's a good idea. I like
What's-
that
what's
idea.
wrong- what's
Merfolk
wrong
when
with
they have a blue Urborg?
Minamo? Yeah, I don't know.
Merfolk
Moisten the
Spirit
Revolt.
Guide, exile for a blue, play your Lord of Atlantis T1. I don't see a downside here.
Oh my god.
Is Lord of Atlantis even good on turn 1? I don't think so.
Are you good on turn 1?
No, because he mulched the 4.
Draw no land pass. At least he's not discarding the hand size, folks. It's gonna be a while.
Not
We'll see you
anytime
turn 4.
soon. Not anytime soon.
Oh, man.
Look, I've won on a Multifor, alright?
Oh, we know. We we know.
Oh my god.
Look, when you do it every game, sometimes you gotta get there.
Okay, Shep Krog from YouTube asks, is reading the meta something in cEDH tournaments? I think yeah, certainly. It can be pretty hard, I think, to predict where you're going to run into in a cEDH tournament. Obviously, there's often going to be a lot of players. Even though there are definitely top-tier decks, a lot of people are going to be bringing really random stuff like Rashmi Control. And so you never know what you're going to run into.
All right. Yeah, Rashmi Control.
You never know what you're going to run into at these tournaments, you know. But I think you can definitely say, okay, I think right now, overall, a lot of people are playing ad nos decks. And therefore, do you know what I should play? I think a Stacks deck is going to be well positioned here. I know that this Discord that is hosting this tournament is really, really mid-rangey. So maybe Teamer Pirates, you know, maybe Teamer Malcolm is the way to go because that deck can really prey on mid-range strategies. Yeah, I think that's certainly something that is a thing for cEDH tournaments.
I would 100% agree. There's if you follow like all of the big, you know, cEDH people on Twitter and keep up with everything in Discord and stuff like that, you know what's going on YouTube. It's you can kind of get a feeling of like what's popular or what people think is really good. You know, as of late it's been Adnaz, but there's been a lot of talk of like mid-range being really powerful in tournaments and things like that, because in general, if you look at the large cEDH tournaments, mid-range ends up doing really well. So you can, I mean, obviously people are going to show up with, you know, a bunch of people are going to show up with just random decks, but for the most part, you think the people that really keep up with the stuff are probably going to be playing something mid-range because that's what does well. So you might want to show up with something that maybe beats mid-range. So yeah, that's what I'd have to say about it. You can definitely read a meta. Just try to follow as many people as you can and stuff like that. So Classic Side Part from YouTube asks, what's the point where you would consider a deck cEDH viable, and when would you consider it something like high power? What are your points of evaluation, if you will? So I have 3 metrics that I use for basically saying something is cEDH or if it's high power. The first one would be you are either able to interact with decks that are trying to win early, or you're able to slow them down with something like stacks. So if you're not able to do either of those things, if you're just like playing a landfall strategy where you're just putting a bunch of mana into play and you can't do anything about an ad nauseum on turn 2 or 3 or whatever, I don't know if I would consider that cEDH, because you're just not going to win very many games like that. And the other thing you can do is just, if you have ways to stacks out the board, I've always said that you can make almost anything viable if you play enough stacks pieces and mulligan correctly. So that would be my first point. Second point would be having a reasonable window to win the game, and that would be whether you have like some kind of fast combo, or just are able to stacks out the board enough that you have basically locked everything down and can win that way. And my third point would be to have a focused and efficient game plan, and that usually involves playing a lot of tutors, ways to find your win cons, and just kind of not being all over the place. Like you want to have like the best counter spells if you're playing a control deck, things like that.
For me, when you want a deck to be cEDH viable, the first thing I look at is the interaction in your deck. Every deck, most decks need to be able to interact early and consistently. But you don't always need the best interaction, you just need to be able to interact. So you don't have to be like, fully budgetless, if you will. There are plenty of budget decks out there that are cEDH viable, but don't run all of the cEDH staples like Fast Mana and Force of Will and Pact Negation. Yes, those will make your decks better, but it doesn't mean your deck won't be cEDH viable. A large part about cEDH, though, is your mindset when you're going into a game, and how you execute your game plan, whether or not you're using, the win at all cost, mentality, versus like, I'm just going to do, I think Mike said some like landfall strategy or whatever, which is very good in casual EDH, but doesn't really cut it in cEDH because everything is just going so much faster. You don't have time to build up like that sort of like game plan.
So to build off of Mike's point, a good like summary of this threshold between high power and cEDH is kind of goes like this: can your deck consistently and meaningfully interact with the game state by the third turn? So are you attempting to execute a combo or executing the combo? Are you playing some sort of stacks effects to slow everything down? Are you meaningfully putting yourself towards a win nearly every single game with your deck? If you're able to cross that threshold, then you're starting to get into the realm of cEDH.
So our next question here is, what's an archetype, strategy, or card package that you would love to put in your cEDH deck, but doesn't fit due to card bannings, mana restraints, timing, or fragility? We recently just did a no ban list game, and I deployed that exact strategy. And you can't play it in normal cEDH because it plays Fast Bond and it plays Caracas. Two very banned cards for very, very good reasons. But the combo in the deck was 4-color Omnath. You get Strip Mine, Crucible of Worlds, Fast Bond, and Courser of Crufix in play. And what this combo allows you to do is, also with Caracas, it lets you go infinite with killing all of your opponent's lands, generating infinite mana, and then bouncing and replaying your commander to draw your deck. It's a super sweet combo, but it takes a lot of cards and a lot of banned cards, and just isn't like, even if the cards weren't banned, I don't think it would be a viable strategy in cEDH. But it's really cool, that's for sure.
Grizzlebrand. Nothing compares to Grizzlebrand. I'm telling you, Adnaz has nothing on Grizzlebrand.
No,
oh my god, I reanimated it a bunch of times.
No, it's one life per card instead of like 1.2 or 2 or whatever.
Yeah, just like, here, I'm going to flip 7 cards. Oh, it feels so good.
Yeah, banned for a reason. We found that out.
Oh,
we did.
100%.
Yeah.
He's like, I have Swords to Plowshares. I'm like, okay, I'll draw 28 cards in response.
Do you know I found out
Oh,
there's
it
no
doesn't
ban
matter.
list games? Hull Breacher should stay banned.
Stay.
Yeah.
Even in no
Oh my
ban
God.
list, it was brutal.
Hull Breacher
It
was one
was.
of the most powerful things played in a no ban list game. It was nuts.
Wow.
So the archetype or strategy that I'd really like to play in cEDH specifically is anything jank flavored. Some of the cards like Coalition Victory are unfortunately banned for reasons. There's sometimes I like to make certain imagery or stories happen within a game, like equipping Nicole Bolas to Nicole Bolas. Anything that's sort of a teetering Rube Goldberg machine of Magic cards, or just funny, whatever happenings in a game, or what I'd like to have happen. But in the meantime, and since there's still technically this goal of winning at all costs, I'll be okay with my flying shark and living trees that flicker lands to do fun stuff.
For me, I actually have two. So the first one is the tap your commander to go fetch something Paradox strategy. This would be Arkham Daxon or Paradox Sisay. So Sisay, I believe it's Weatherlight Captain. They had these basically, if you can, untap and tap with your commander, you win. But unfortunately, Paradox Engine was the main crux of those archetypes. So they were completely nuked when Paradox Engine got banned. But they were a lot of fun to play. The second one that I wish was a strategy that could be actually cEDH viable that just never ends up being quite there is the Enchantress strategies. So the ones where you put out a bunch of Enchantress effects, draw a bunch of cards. The one that I played was a Tuvasa, the Sunlit deck, and the reason that it was too good for casual but not good enough for cEDH was because it would play Enduring Ideal. It's that one where you search your library for an enchantment, put it on the battlefield, and it has the epic thing where you can't cast spells the rest of the game. So during your upkeep, you get to copy the spell and do it again and again. So the first thing I do is go find Fall of the Thran and destroy everyone's lands. The second thing I do is go find Solemnity, so you couldn't actually put any extra counters on the Saga of Fall of the Thran, so no one would get their lands back. And then just every turn, I'd slowly just, lock people out of the game with this ideal effect. So the Enduring Ideal thing's really fun and stuff, but just Enchantress in general just never quite seems to get there. It draws a bunch of cards, and it does some ramp with some, auras on your lands, but it just really doesn't close out the game, and it always ends up just being relegated more towards casual. Now, with Modern Horizons 2 coming out, getting a bunch more cards and stuff, maybe somebody is brewing something out there that I'm unaware of. I would love to see it. But as of right now, as of this recording, I haven't seen any real viable Enchantress strategies yet, and I would absolutely love to see that in cEDH. All right, so Brandon Boyd on YouTube actually asks 3 questions. First one is, what got you, being anyone on the team, into cEDH? Where do you see cEDH going in the future? And then the last one was, who are some cEDH content creators that do you think deserve more attention? So as far as the first one goes, what got me into cEDH, we actually have a video, and there'll be a link in the card or whatever above, that talks about the story of playing with Power, and that includes how a lot of us got into cEDH. But the very long short of it is that we had a guy come in, play a very strong cEDH deck against us, and it piqued our interest a little, and it kind of built, and everyone kind of built to battle this person. And then we all battled against each other and absolutely loved it, and was just playing cEDH from that day forward. Definitely the story goes into a lot more detail, so definitely check out the link in the description or the card for that video. Where do you see cEDH going into the future? This is a really good question, because there could be 20 different answers and they could all be right. What I see as far as the future of cEDH goes is that there is an ebb and flow that happens in the cEDH world. We go into these super fast, turbo, quick metas, and then what happens is that we get this buildup of these decks that counteract the turbo, and so it ebbs to one way and it flows into the other, and that's when things like these mid-range decks start to spike up and start to do really well. And every time this type of thing happens, something comes out to counteract that, and it goes back and forth and back and forth. One other thing that I see is I see a new Thoracle Replacement or Thoracle Buster coming out. So things like Dress Down are starting to get printed to kind of counteract that ETB value type thing, and Thoracle's an ETB win the game trigger. So I see a couple more Thoracle Busters coming out, and or a Thoracle Breaker, basically saying that now we have two really good strategies for Thoracle. There's no reason why they don't want to print something like that to keep pushing this game forward. So I could absolutely see another Thoracle-esque card being printed within the next 12, 18 months that is going to actually put things like Thoracle into a seat 2 position in favor of whatever this card's going to be. Now, what that card looks like, I have no idea, of course. I'm not an R&D. I don't have any insider information, but I could absolutely see something coming out and being as big as Thoracle as far as shaking up the meta goes. All it takes is one card to do that, and they print a bunch of cards every year in order to do that. So C, or the last one is, what are some cEDH content creators that you think deserve more attention? I could do this for days. So there are a ton of different cEDH content creators out there. There's a really little brand. There's this really little channel. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it. They're called Playing with Power, and they're they're really, really good. And so, no, I'm just kidding. But there's a bunch of them. Like, if you haven't heard of Play to Win and the Spike Feeders, which I really doubt, if you know who Playing with Power is, I'm sure you've heard of these people. They're all really great. But some other ones that really deserve some love are ones, Kingdoms TV. They're out there and they're really, really good. They have some great gameplay. Possibility Storm is another one. One of the ones that are kind of climbing, and I think they're really good, is Moderately Anonymous MTG. Definitely check them out if you haven't. Smooth Brain EDH, which is a fantastic name, I've got to say. Absolutely love their name, and their content's great too. Dead on Board is another. Roll for Crypt is another. The Commander Dojo is one you should check out as well. And then from just to kind of throw this last one in here, I've recently discovered them. They've been around for a while, but their gameplay is fantastic. They don't do cEDH, but I highly recommend you check them out. They're called Games Haven, and their quality is fantastic. Their gameplay is really good. I highly recommend you go check out Games Haven. Their videos are very entertaining, and I can't recommend them enough. So there'll be links for all of those in the description below, and those are the ones I definitely recommend to everybody.
So what got me into cEDH? Back in 2015 or 2016, I ran across this PDF that was called the 17 Best Commander Decks, and I can't remember what site it was from. It was on one of the very few websites that were out there for cEDH content at the time, and it was full of ideas that I had never even thought of and cards I'd never seen before, and it had all this fast mana, and it was talking about food chain combos and infinite kobolds with Prosh, and locking the board out and destroying all your opponent's lands with Brago, and infinite artifact shenanigans with Sharoom, and just these huge ideas. And then in that same document was Edric, Spymaster of Trust, and it was talking about playing a bunch of 1/1s, swinging and chaining together some time locks, and I thought, reading about all these other decks, there is no way that this is good. So I went on to my deck building website, tapped out, put the deck list in there, and was goldfishing it, and I was hooked. It was significantly better than I could have imagined, and that's also why Edric is one of my favorite, or is my favorite cEDH deck of today. Where do I see cEDH going in the future? This is going to be a little bit of a sarcastic answer, but based on the power level of cards that Wizards of the Coast has been printing recently and continues to print, I think it's just going to go crazy. I think cEDH will definitely become more and more popular, especially since the stigma of the pub stomping cEDH players has gone down. The rise in popularity of cEDH as a whole, especially with the subreddit, has been, getting more popular over the last few years. But I think that things are going to get more and more insane by the release from Wizards of the Coast, because Thassa's Oracle came out of nowhere, and if you haven't heard the story of it, it was kind of at the last moment before production that they decided to It was either add or not redact the "you win the game" clause on Thassa's Oracle. So with really small decisions like that, or maybe with some lack of quality control, or maybe lack of double checking the cards with pro players of the community in some way, I think cEDH is just going to get more and more busted as time goes on.
What got me into cEDH, I think I've kind of got the classic tale of, I started playing Commander long ago. I played Commander long before I even knew cEDH was a thing. And over time, as I continually played more and more, primarily I was a 60-card one-on-one player. Lots of standard, lots of modern. In many ways, I am like a competitive player at heart. As time went on and on, myself and the people playing around me, we kept optimizing our decks more and more. And before we knew it, we had kind of almost stumbled into 85% cEDH decks without even knowing it, kind of even before cEDH was all that popular of a thing. This is back in, 2015, 2016, before it was even more of a more popularized movement, before there was a lot of cEDH content creators and all this kind of stuff. Then as the movement itself started to gain steam, I was like, wait a second, I'm already playing cEDH. I can make these 10 card changes better in my decks. And all of a sudden, whoa, I have a completely optimized deck. So it was a very natural, it was a very logical progression thing of me just incidentally raising deck power over the years. And then I've been doing it for years since.
Sparfan1337 from YouTube asks, do you have pets? And if so, what kind? I have 3 dogs, 2 mini schnauzers, and a golden doodle, Bandit, Brody, and Luna, and they are amazing.
As far as pets on my end, I have 3 cats and an Italian greyhound, and I also have 2 slaw bunnies.
And with that, we are going to wrap it up. A big thank you to all of you for submitting your questions across all of our social medias. We're really sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but we had well over 100 questions come in. So thanks again for submitting your questions.
A big thanks to our sponsors, TCG Player, Dragon Shield, and support from everyone over at Patreon. That about wraps it up for this episode of the podcast. Tune in next time when we talk about our favorite format and our favorite game, Magic the Gathering. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and we will see you next time.
I always wave. Wave to our audience.